Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude at BeyondMystic, and welcome to this precious metals report here, the silver shortage with Chris Marcus and Andy SCHECTMAN. You can find Chris on YouTube here at Arcadia Economics and also on his website at arcadiaeconomics.com. Let's give him a big warm welcome. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Hola, mi amigo. How are you?
Bien, gracias. Et tu?
Muy bien. Life is good here in Mexico. Learning Mexican time. It's a nicer pace than what I recall from the U.S. And yeah, come on, visit. We got that pool in the background, and let's
I can see that.
after the show.
Let's talk about the siesta in a moment. Let me introduce Andy. Of course, he's the president of milesfranklin.com. You can meet him. You can find him at milesfranklin.com here. Give him a big warm welcome. Andy, welcome back to the show.
Great to see you, JC. I wish you and I were sitting poolside with Chris in Mexico, but maybe Silverfest will be able to do that. In the meantime, it's good to be back.
Right, absolutely. We'll get into all of your shenanigans there, Chris. I'm living vicariously through you because we're still on lockdown here. Although we just opened phase 2 today, we're all excited about that because it's a little bit earlier than expected. And so I'm going back to the pool, this little, what do you call them? Water park with the kids here right after this show. But at any rate, let's talk about this. I put up a few slides for you today. This to me was very shocking here. We're starting to see crumblings here. The central banks are having issues. The local banks are having issues. This is in Lebanon. These banks are closing. They have protesters inside because the banks had limited access to their funds. So we're starting to see huge cracks in the system. Of course, we've talked about this before. The Fed has lost control. The hyperinflation is here to stay. What's happening too on the de-dollarization front, more and more countries are backing up now, either doing trade outside of the US dollar or in this particular case here also adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. This has huge ramifications across the board. Also, we still have this global chip shortage. It's hitting the car market now in China and Japan. I'm actually seeing it here in Canada. The dealers are reporting here shortages in terms of getting new vehicles on the line. And finally, of course, we had that admission or this installment of Basel III that just took effect here a couple of days ago, which has major ramifications also for the gold and silver market. Where do we want to start with that? Chris, I'll start with you. I haven't had you on for a while here. First of all, where are you? What's going on? And what's in Mexico? What's going on? Chris, I think your mic is muted for some reason.
Oops, sorry about that.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, well, a great way of life is going on in Mexico that it's kind of one of those things where it's hard to see outside of your own fishbowl sometimes. And a lot of the things that I experienced in the US that I think people are expressing of, quantitative easing and all sorts of policies that make it harder and harder to just live like a normal person. So it's been life-changing just being here a couple of weeks. You don't need financial aid to pick your favorite meal on the menu. Everything is less expensive. You can see the peaceful healthiness in people's eyes. They're just happy to be there. There's people who don't make fractions of what Americans and Canadians make in income-wise, yet they just live. It's almost like not quite as zonked by all of the things that happen in the mainland. So I'm happy to be here. Plus, obviously, we're going to need a tropical location for Silverfest, as silver investors deserve. And I felt, obviously, you need to be on the ground checking out the villas in person. And Jean-Claude, I'm actually even making arrangements because it's kind of hard for me to see how anybody would leave once they've experienced it. And for people who come to Silverfest and say, I don't want to go back home, I'll have information ready for those folks too. And yeah, and who knows what the price of silver will be by then.
Right. So when is Silverfest, and do you have a link on arcadiaeconomics.com where people can stay in touch and in tune here to this upcoming event?
Silverfest is this October 26th to 31st, which obviously does mean that Saturday the 30th into Sunday the 31st, we will be planning an epic Halloween party with musical and otherwise features and all sorts of great stuff. I'd ask people, please go easy on the Janet Yellen costumes because there could be children there as and obviously that can get very scary.
Oh, yes.
But there's not a link up on the website. I did talk to one of my marketing gurus today who's starting to get that made, which is exciting. But it will be in the Puerto Vallarta area. So if anyone really wants to get their flight now, 26th to the 31st, we'll be there and we'll have more information soon. I hear Old Man SCHECTMAN even is going to you're going to be allowed out down here, buddy?
Yeah, I'm coming. I wouldn't miss it, Chris. Just to be able to get out and be with people again will be really, really nice. So first step was moving to Florida out of Minnesota, and I couldn't think of a better way to cap off the second half of the year than hanging in Mexico with you and some like-minded people for 5 days. Sounds amazing.
I'd love to join you.
That's what I thought would be... Yeah, well, we got a villa waiting for you, JC. And, you know, part of the reason why I feel pretty confident about this going well, I mean, it helped that we had an event last year online. But really my strategy, maybe it took me 42 and a half years to figure this out. But if you find what people want and deliver it, things actually go incredibly well. This idea that anyone should be struggling financially. And the way I've been approaching this is imagining for 5 days, what is the greatest heavenly fantasy camp you could create for silver investors. So any suggestions or events people would like, such as watching the celebrity tennis match with Dave Kranzler, an actual tour to a silver mine with Jorge of Reina Silver and Dr. Peter McGaw, legendary geologist. And again, to show that I'm not just saying that I'm going to listen to what people want and then ignore it. I see Jenny Alicia in the chat room has said, bring your silver bikinis. So obviously, without being inappropriate on the show or getting us censored or anything, I support what the audience wants. You can get your autograph with James Bond SCHECTMAN and all of your other favorite silver celebrities. So I'll look forward to seeing you there. Anyone wants to come early, meet me at the pier.
That's awesome. I hope I can make it by that time. Here, again, the needle is going in the opposite direction with all of these passports and all of that stuff, but we won't get into that here. Andy,
Chris is going to wear his silver Speedo. That's what.
Or silver Speedo. I'm not sure I want to see that. Okay. Okay, let me start with Andy here. Andy, when you were on a couple of weeks ago here with Bill Holter, we talked about this Basel III regulation taking effect here on June 28th. And you guys were ultimately on the same page in terms of what would eventually happen, but not exactly on the same page as to the when. There was a lot of mitigating factors now. So we've seen the regulation take place earlier this week, and so far we haven't seen the explosion as a result of that. What do you make of that, and what can you share with the audience here as to the why maybe we're in this limbo period right now?
Well, for me, the real big development I take away from Basel III happened in 2019, and that was the reclassification of gold as the world's only other Tier 1 reserve. So that, to me, is the big piece. To have expected the market to have taken off on the 28th when only the European banks had to be in line with the regulations, I thought was kind of a hope, a wish. When you realize that the UK and the US have until the end of the year to be compliant, it certainly, I think, makes it a little bit easier to understand why we haven't seen that yet. Ultimately, I think what happened was a fuse was lit, and it's a long fuse that will go through the whole second half of the year. And if Basel III really is, if the Bank of International Settlements really is concerned about the unallocated nature of the London Metals Exchange and ultimately the COMEX, then these banks will have to get in line, and you will see real, or at least a more real reflection of price discovery. But to have hoped to have seen it here, June 28th, I think was a little bit of I don't know, an unrealistic hope. But I do think by the second half of the year, we'll begin to see if indeed this is for real and the banks really do need to get in line, we should see a much more accurate reflection of what price discovery really is.
Okay. And How about you? Do you have any thoughts, Chris, on this Basel III regulation and how it's affecting or will affect the market? And what are your contacts saying around the world in terms of maybe these new requirements and whether or not the banks will actually acquire this metal to meet the requirements, or are they waiting for a revaluation of the actual price to the upside so that they meet those requirements? What do you have to say about that, Chris?
I would ask you if you're entirely sure that those are not all mutually exclusive.
Good question.
So let's see. Maybe we'll tell a little story to answer that one here. Because in my youth, I was trained by a bunch of statisticians who used to go to the racetrack and win. Then they realized the downside, put skew was mispriced in 1987, made more money than they expected, became a trading shop, trained us in poker using the analogies of how in the market you don't have perfect information. And I would suggest the way that we're herded by CNBC and Wall Street Journal in this country, it's like people want to know the sure thing. And they want to know when it's going to happen, which is understandable. But it's kind of like, all right, well, if you say, well, I'm going to buy silver after the price breaks 100. Well, then it's already 100. It's like same with Bitcoin. I don't know, maybe it'll go higher. But even if Bitcoin hits $1 million now, at least when it was 50,000, you're a 20 bagger. And that's still a big move. What I'm getting at is that that's how it works. You have to put the trade on before it's occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where, I was fortunate. We were trained to strip out those biases. But to me, it seems pretty analogous to the tone this week, whereas a lot of people feel like they're throwing in the towel. Andy, I know you've been hearing that a lot. It's kind of like a new level of panic because I think a lot of people heard the Basel III thing and like, all right, this is finally going to end it. And then it didn't happen within days. My gut tells me that 5 years from now, if we're doing a show like this, we'll be looking back and say, okay, yeah, now in hindsight, that was the beginning of the rollout of whatever's coming. But
Right.
Fortunately, we don't have to take my opinion for it. I like to make that my trademark. You don't have to trust me. Let's just maybe review a few things that have happened in recent months.
Go ahead.
So we had this silver squeeze thing that came out of left field, and that was before there was 120 or 130,000 people on Wall Street silver buying the heck out of silver every time the price gets smashed because they know it's rigged, and then taking pictures and like having a chest thumping contest in a positive way. So I looked at date they started was January 29th, which was the Friday of silver squeeze. So then you had the greatest period of silver buying in history. Bank's own ETF data shows that. Unfortunately, we have a bullion dealer here. Andy, would you confirm what I've asked you before? Was February 2nd, the day the price fell 10%. Have you ever sold more silver in the history of your company?
No, and I was taking phone calls till 2 a.m. And as you mentioned on your show, had I been online, I would have taken more business. And we received more phone calls, more interest, more orders by a massive magnitude on February 1st and 2nd than at any time since or before in the 30 years we've done this.
All right. So then we had the price get tamped down, which now it's traditionally unusual for the regulators to actually tell you that there's a price capping operation. I thought that was odd. I'm guessing they didn't expect anyone to look or to see that, similar to how Jeff Curry didn't expect anyone to look and see the things he was saying, and then connect that with how he did the exact opposite with his lawyers and the legal prospectus in between his appearances on Bloomberg and CNBC, where he talked about how a short squeeze was impossible. Yet then, as an authorized participant, Goldman Sachs is to many of these trusts, they changed the prospectus language specifically to protect them against a short squeeze. Funnily enough, in the SIVR prospectus, they even talked about the large short position held by banks and hedge funds that investors were targeting. But again, as often happens when Ponzi schemes start getting discussed more, these things slip out and they don't realize inadvertently what they're admitting, similar to when former President Obama advocating rigging CPI as a means of deficit reduction. I might add that was to avoid the debt ceiling limit, which is popping up back now that Janet Yellen is quite scared of. So, you had a few unusual things happening. Now, I thought it was pretty bizarre when Rostin Benham said about price tamping and how the price of silver is controlled, the volatility is controlled by a committee that included a vote from JP Morgan that was fined $920 million last year, given a new deferred prosecution agreement. I don't know if it overlapped with the deferred prosecution agreement they signed after pulling their money out of Bernie Madoff, where they were his sole banker first, but we see a track record. So, I thought that was worth keeping an eye on. Andy, you remember I called you about 50 times that first week of February saying, I don't think it's possible that you could add 116 million ounces into these trusts, especially while even if you're actually putting the metal in, let alone to have, you actually had the price lower by the end of February 2nd than before the whole thing started. So the greatest surge of demand in history, David Morgan didn't believe it. Auditor Rob Keynes, who, good luck going against him as a witness in court, he didn't think it was possible. Then a couple months later, the LBMA says, oops, we had 116 million ounce miscount. Okay. Some people say they're not concerned about it. I say that leaves the original question unanswered of, was that metal put in? You ask contacts around the world, JC, well, I'll say unofficially, I don't think that it was. And we'll leave that at that. Then we had the LBMA report where they confirmed that fears emerged that they were weeks away from running out of metal. The LBMA, that's including members JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, they said that there was so much attention, they were concerned they were going to run out of metal. These are their words, not mine. You can Google LBMA Silver Report, read this fascinating document, where they also talked about how the bank risk managers were scared. They saw what was happening. I mean, they went and changed the prospectus and lied about it without telling anyone. So obviously they were scared. We're not surprised by that. But they told their traders to stop issuing so much paper for a couple of days, and the price went up. And then when they resumed that, when they increased the paper supply, not the actual silver supply, the price went back down. Again, this is, I forget which page that was on. I mean, I was reading this, falling out of my chair. Then you had Ed Moy, the former director of the U.S. Mint, doing interviews where they're asking him, does the Mint have enough silver to cover the obligations? He says no. The woman interviewing him was so shocked. She asked a second time. She's like, you want a second crack at that? Is that really what you're saying? And he just gives one of these, yes, I believe that is the case. But here's what I don't get. When you look at all that, and I mean, there's a litany of bankerish folks that say the exact same thing. Jim Rickards, who I know a lot of people say is an insider, he said the same thing as well. He said the metal's not there.
Yeah.
And we saw when the price of silver went over $30 for a couple of hours, there was such a mania. Andy couldn't answer all of his phone calls. They're putting JM Bullion on CNBC. Wall Street Journal writes their first article in silver since 2011, probably. So if the price goes up and you get a buying panic, but then on June 17th, when silver got whacked $1.50, Andy, what was the order flow like that day, sir?
Huge, enormous. In fact,
and why?
And that's because of people like you and JC who have kind of lifted up the skirt, so to speak, and people see what's underneath and know that, the paper price is non-reflective of demand in that same environment where 120 million ounces are supposedly delivered into SLV, and all of the online companies are shutting down because of demand. And for the first time in 30 years, I shut down the following day on Saturday because of demand and because we were staring into the abyss, so to speak, into an open on Sunday night, and we were already well past what we had hedged over the weekend. In that type of demand, no one in their right mind would drop that kind of silver onto the market to depress the price, and people realize it's a subsidy. One other thing I would just like to comment real quick, Chris, about the thing that you were saying just a few minutes ago about you have to be in beforehand, before these moves. That's classic what the big money has been doing for the last several years, repositioning quietly, accumulating massive amounts in both gold and silver, taking huge deliveries off of COMEX. The big money is using the price to misdirect the public so they can do exactly that. I agree 100% with what you're saying.
Well,
and go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
I'll have a question for you momentarily. Thank you for giving me the time to set this up. But
I appreciate that, and I just queued this up. I don't want you to forget this guy and the whole story and the keyboard.
Oh, come on, man! I came to Mexico to forget all that nonsense, but sure we can. I might, if we do that, I might have to take the laptop out to the pool. But
it's just a good opportunity here. Our channel was just deleted, so this reference, you and I have talked about this already, but it's gone. So it's good that we put it back on the record for the audience here today. I appreciate your time.
So here's my question, though. If when the price goes up, you get a buying panic, and when the price goes down, you get rabid buying. And the last two inflation prints were 4.2% and 5%. Yet home prices are up 24% on the year, and that's biggest chunk of the economy. Like what happened? Like we're in a hyperinflation campaign. In fact, it was interesting. That first story you showed where they were storming the central bank in Lebanon. As soon as you put that up, it instantly reminded me, because I've been reading books about the Hunt brothers in 1980, and they all mention how, in addition to what was happening there, you had the Iranian embassy stormed. So where does that leave us? What direction, if the price goes up and there's a buying panic, and the price goes down, there's massive buying, and then all the bankers are telling us they're running out of silver. What direction does the price have to go in for that demand to stop?
It has to do nothing for the price. I mean, if it just sat right here and didn't move up or down, it's in idle times that people, I think,
what if we get a 6% inflation print next month? Producer price index was already 6.6. I know Wall Street doesn't think it's cool to talk about that one, but where did the consumer prices come from?
I had Jim Willie on just the other day, and he was talking about 20 and 25% inflation already, and that's not.
This is the point. This is the point with everything, and it's what you and I were talking about offline, JC. To me, what was most disturbing through the last 18 months has been the amount of censorship. We're being told by the Federal Reserve and by the media that this 5% CPI clip is transitory, which is crap. And you're beginning to see it if you look close that the Fed is never right. And the Fed always tells us everything's all right until everything explodes, just like Bernanke telling us the subprime crisis is in check before the whole thing explodes. For them to be able to tell us that inflation is transitory and is not a problem, we're going to normalize and we're going to raise rates, the hell you are. You raise rates and the whole thing collapses. And they'll never raise rates. They'll never go to austerity unless they are forced to by the market. And so everything Chris is saying is spot on, 100%, no question about it.
Jean-Claude, what if the people running the show who are writing these reports and telling you that they're out of metal, what if they realize we're essentially at the point equivalent to London Gold Pool Part 2, where you simply, it's run out? Would that match? Really, when you think about what's happened over the past decade, I don't know, why are countries repatriating their gold? Why are central banks buying gold? Is it possible they're doing something they're not telling us about? And I would assert that, either there's a reset of some form coming or there's not. Hey, if there's not, I don't know, maybe you think that the price of silver just makes sense at $25 when Bitcoin is up 320x since 2013. Or maybe it's going to happen the day that it happens, and the benefit of owning physical silver or depending on what kind of other assets, whether it's mining shares, if you have stuff you can just sit and leave there, then perhaps you can hit the pool. You don't have to worry about this stuff, because at this point, I'll sit here and remind people when need be, but you either believe what you believe or you don't. I wonder what's the alternatives. Do you sell your silver and go load up on Tesla shares or negative yielding treasuries? I see these headlines about how, gold is down because of the dollar strength. I mean, what fool outside of a Wall Street headline writer believes dollar strength while 40% of them have been printed in the last year? You tell me dollar strength within the framework of a Ponzi scheme? Sure. And if you want to short-term trade that stuff, knock yourself out. But if you don't want to be a hedge fund wizard and you want to leave something in savings, whether it's for your children or your retirement for the next 20 years, I don't know. Maybe someone in the audience can tell me what I should buy. I mean, Bitcoin, fine. It's
Can I just add?
A little late, but
I
sure.
just want to add one point to what Chris was saying too, and it's important. I've talked about at length for the last 18 months about Basel III and about all the banks are repositioning and adding gold, and we talked at length. We had all the European banks and what have you, and there's talk recently about some of the banks slowing down their gold acquisition, yet others are just picking it up. In April and May, Hungary tripled its gold reserves by adding 63 tons in March. And we just saw that Singapore just added a tremendous amount of gold. In fact, I think they bought something like almost 9. What was it? Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Thailand bought 90 tons of gold the other day. So you got all these banks who have really been out of the news in terms of gold acquisition that are now jumping on the same bandwagon that we've seen for the past 4 years, starting with the Bundesbank in Germany repatriating. That's the Bank of Hungary, the Bank of Turkey, the Bank of Poland, the Bank of Austria, the Dutch National Bank. They've all been gobbling it up, and now you're seeing these smaller banks buying huge amounts, 90 tons of gold, by the Bank of Thailand, 63 tons more by the Bank of Hungary. The Bank of Hungary was one of the first banks to repatriate their gold after Germany. The banks are preparing, as Chris is saying, for some sort of a reset. You can see it. And when we talk about silver and price, now Chris, you may know the answer to this. I've been out of town the last couple of days, but with 4 or 5 days left in the June contract, last week, there was 220 million ounces in open interest against 110 million ounces in the registered category. That's twice the open interest if everyone stood for delivery. There's your force majeure. There's your cash settlement. I don't know what they whittled it down to. Maybe you do. Maybe we'll find out today or tomorrow. But we're this close. If with 5 days left in trading, that's what the Hunt brothers saw. With 5 days left in trading, you have twice the amount of open interest that could, if they wanted to, stand for delivery against half the amount of registered silver to be delivered. What happens when you cross that line or just come to a break even where there's nothing left in registered, or we're that close? And so I think that the fact that this isn't being talked about except on places like here in Chris's channel and Big Swear and some of the other guys doing this is why so many people will be so hurt. And then when you see people like you, JC, having to deal with the constant censorship when you do things articulately, politely, respectfully, just telling the truth, you have to deal with that. And this is why so many people are going to be so hurt. But when you look around you and you see the Bank of Thailand out of nowhere, when gold hasn't done much of anything but go down for the last few weeks, add 90 tons, what does that tell you? It tells you that the biggest money in the world is repositioning. When you see the COMEX being this close to being cash settlement, it tells you the biggest money in the world is repositioning. And so I think that what Chris just said is really very important. And you can see the lengths to which they have gone to blur reality, keep the truth from the public. And I think this is a seminal moment in history where the biggest money in the world is actively doing something to prepare for whatever's coming. And that something has to do with not only buying precious metals, but taking possession and distribution out of the exchanges, off of the COMEX, away from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. This is central. This is really all that matters. Everything else is noise. When the big money is showing you what they're doing ahead of it, using the manipulated price as cover, you can see where we will be, like Chris said, a year or two from now, we'll look back on this and say, shit, none of that mattered. That was a gift.
Right. Chris, do you have an answer in terms of how many are left standing for delivery to answer Andy? You're muted again. I can't hear you, Chris.
It was about 38 million ounces.
Boy, they whittled that down.
So, it wasn't record setting, but I could share. I figured something out that I think might be helpful to people. If Jean-Claude, could you possibly pull up that Silver Institute chart?
There you go.
So I know a lot of people are wondering today, is the silver manipulation ever going to end? Why is this any different? And I have an answer to that. If you could scroll down slightly more, a little bit more, so we can start get the numbers in there. There we go. Perfect. People are saying, all right, well, what's the difference between today and 10 years ago? Hey, I think Andy already said, people know what's going on. Andy, in fact, have we ever had this much? I was thinking about it. What we've seen this year has to be record setting. Not just that one day, but so
you can see that in Steve St. Angelo's chart where he shows the complete reversal between industrial and investment demand. Since 2020, the investment demand has taken center stage over industrial demand. It's never happened before, ever.
So we have more demand than ever. We have the Wall Street silver thing. I'm doing my show. You're doing a show. We weren't here doing this a couple of years ago.
Right.
But if you look there, you can see that when you add the mining supply plus the recycled scrap and all that other stuff, for the last decade, it's been pretty consistent at about 1 billion ounces per year total supply. You see that there?
Yep.
Wow, look at you all fancy zooming in like John Madden. How about that? Very slick. JC, do you know who John Madden is? Or is that like just a American thing?
No, I don't know.
Football.
Okay.
Oh,
football commentator. Monday Night Football.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I don't watch sports, guys.
I thought you might not be a diehard Broncos fan. So can you scroll down a little further so now we can see the demand numbers? Perfect. Right there. Yep. Stop. So you see then that total demand field. There's the total demand. Makes enough sense. And it's interesting, the bizarre way they do the accounting here. But let me help out a little bit because see 2 lines up from total demand is net physical investment. So that's Andy and his buddies selling physical. So if you take the total demand, which in last year they say 896, we'll call that about 900, subtract out 200. That means for silverware, jewelry, photography, basically the industrial base is about 700 million ounces last year. And then there was 200 for physical. And then what's added lower on, you see they say 80 million ounce surplus, but then you subtract out what was allegedly put into the ETFs, which was 330, and you get a negative or a 251 million ounce deficit last year.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense what I've walked through so far? That'll be important because to get the takeaway from this, but basically your supply is about 1 billion, and it's been pretty consistent, at least according to these numbers, of demand for industrial at about 700 million. Billion supply, industrial demand about 700 million. Pretty consistent if you back out all the numbers, which we won't do now. But does that make sense so far?
Yep.
So people are saying, well, what's the difference today versus 5 years ago? Well, that's part of why you've had, and I would call this silver manipulation most certainly a psychological operation, or psyop as they are known in the field. That's kind of, we'll leave aside who invents those to keep you on the air, JC. But basically, you have a 300 million ounce difference. Now, when the stock market and Tesla and treasuries are soaring, everyone's making a fortune. There wasn't a lot of demand for silver. If you think people are throwing in the towel this week, Andy I'm sure you could tell the stories about what it's been like, especially 8 years ago, 2014, 2015. So as long as you keep the world buying less than 300 million ounces, well, the logistics don't make any sense. The actual supply and demand in the current world stays in check. But then you see what happens once, I think this happened in 2019 as well. But look, last year you had a 250 million ounce deficit, And just coincidentally, the price jumped above $20 for the first time in, I think, since 2013. It did it in a matter of weeks. I don't think these things are unconnected.
Mm-hmm.
So now you had a 250 million ounce deficit last year. Then here in Silver Squeeze weekend, somehow they say if you look at that net investment in ETPs for the 1500 there, or 150, they're saying you're only going to have 150 million ounces go into the ETFs for the year, where, I mean, you had 120 million go in during Silver Squeeze weekend. So that seems low. And Andy, if you go up to the net physical investment, which in 2020 was 200 million ounces, they say that the bullion dealers are only going to sell 50 more million ounces this year than last year. How does that sound to you?
It doesn't jive with anything that I see, whether it be through my own business, through all of the suppliers, through friends I have globally throughout the metals community. And again, you know, maybe you can, I don't know, JC, if you can pull up Steve St. Angelo's graph. I don't know if you have that SRS Rocco, but he shows something completely different, where the physical demand is outpacing the industrial demand over the last year and a half. So it doesn't jive with me. And again, this is all, you know, I would argue that, you know, these institutes, the gold and silver institutes that are supposedly consumer advocates, are really nothing more than mouthpieces for the establishment, because those, again, they're just misdirecting people all the way around. And I'm sorry, JC, to put you on the spot like that, but it's a very interesting graph, because what he does is he goes back over 20 years and shows that 80% of the demand has been industrial year over year over year over year until 2020. It flip-flopped, and it's even greater this year. And so no, I don't think that's possible at all. And I think that the numbers that you're being shown there are completely misleading, completely and totally. Furthermore, look at all of the new uses for silver that are coming up in the green and digital world, on top of the Chinese Belt Road and Rail Initiative, where you're connecting digitally 70% of human population. The need for silver is expansive, and it's depleted in nature. And it's getting harder and harder to find. When I did an interview with Keith Neumeyer in December, it was 8-1. Now he's publicly telling people it's 7-1. So, you know, it's getting harder and harder to find.
Right.
Only 30% of all the silver that comes to market even comes from primary miners like First Majestic. 70% comes from the byproduct mining of other metals. We are so close to that moment where you just can't find it any longer, and price becomes more reflective or price discovery becomes more reflective of actual demand. Yeah, the numbers that Chris is showing you, everything seems legit until you get to the investment demand, which they are way, way understating globally.
Well, Chris, I haven't had you on for a while, and I wanted your take on this too. When we talk about this flipping between the investment demand and the industrial demand, does that perhaps at least partly explain why we're still seeing these global chip shortages here, and how that's creating havoc in our supply and in our manufacturing? Are we going to see this worse and worse and worse going on here as the investment side gobbles up all the physical silver?
I mean, I couldn't tell you that there's a direct connection. I've heard people suggest that. It would make enough sense to me. It was interesting. The guy, you know that show Pawn Stars?
Yep.
The guy from there was on Kitco. He was saying it's getting really hard to find silver. It goes out as soon as it comes in. And what we just went through on that chart, that's the reason why. Okay, when in the last 10 years, when everyone was freaked out and throwing in the towel, you held it together. Now, if there's a 300 million ounce gap between industrial and the total supply, well, if people are going to buy 500 million ounces of silver or more, you're going to have this problem. Mm-hmm. That's why it is different now, which isn't to say I know the day that it's going to pop, but I mean, they're telling you the same thing. The signs are there. In fact, it's just like that scene at the end of The Big Short where they bought the insurance on the bonds. So basically, if the bond defaults, insurance is supposed to pay out. The bonds start defaulting and insurance price didn't move until you get that last scene where Burry goes into Goldman Sachs, or he calls him and says, or no, Goldman finally calls him after ignoring him for months, saying, oh, we're looking at our positions and actually we've marked it. So they're finally going to mark his trade properly. And he says, oh, I think what you mean to say is that now that you've established your own significant short position, now you're gonna pay me off. Now that you put a bigger position on, so you can pay off my thing. It's a drop in the bucket.
Right.
And that's why you saw the price. People are pissed on Monday because the price was getting clobbered. These are the banks that are short. They had deliveries coming up. What everything I saw the last 4 months looks to me is that, hey, if you've been cheating and rigging the market for 40 years, why stop now? I mean, they're trying to get out of as many short positions as possible. You can see it on the reports. Goldman showed up issuing a big chunk. They were short and had to deliver it in March. So when Jeff Curry was saying that stuff, I don't know when they put the position on, but there's a good chance he profited from it for being lower. And they told you how scared they were. They're telling you all of this. The canaries are falling over in the coal mine. They're all dead. And I don't know how it will unfold, but I mean, when I see Basel III at this particular time, you have Putin over in Russia who's sticking it to the Americans any chance he can get. China doesn't sound thrilled. And JC, I know you bring Cliff on. What if, let's say, tack that on top, what if Cliff is right? And if the stuff that Cliff is seeing happening is right, or even a fraction of it, you're going to hold this silver manipulation together through that. Well, you have the debt ceiling coming up, 5% inflation prints. I mean, it's not like they're talking about deficit reduction. It's not like, Ron Paul became president here. Fired off $500 billion the other day. I mean, you got these weird things. I don't know if they're out of the White House. Jean-Claude, I don't know if you saw that video. I actually went to the White House earlier this year. There's not a darn person there. It looked like a ghost town.
I published it a couple of times.
I don't know what the heck is going on with that, but
yeah.
But I mean, it's like you're getting the signs. I don't know how many more warning signs there will be.
Right. And you're right about Cliff. I was just showing his. Of course, he's not on YouTube anymore for the same reasons. So, folks, I seem to have my frozen. Oh, okay, I think we're back now. Anyways, go check him out here. He's on BitChute. The last two videos, specifically this one, the Electric Woo, he talks about what perhaps is coming here and what Chris is alluding to. And some of it could be grave, although the Webbot data tends to focus more on the negative stuff. And it's also predicting language, not necessarily the events, but the language that we are going to talk about. So keep that in mind as you're watching and entering all of these inputs into your field here. Gentlemen, we have about maybe 5 or 10 minutes left here, and I appreciate all of this recap because, again, our last couple of shows are all gone. They were nuked, and there's a lot of new people coming on board here. They're dropping over from mainstream media and coming here to figure out what the hell's happening because they're realizing that they're lying to them on the mainstream news. So now that they're getting a taste here for all these signs and these markers that are telling them something is not right and it's not as usual, what can they do? I know you guys are big on physical silver and gold. Andy, you sent me 2 promos for this week for the BeyondMystic audience. Let's talk about that. Andy, let me bring you on the screen here. What do you have for the audience here who's looking to maybe put some hands on some physical gold and silver and who are having trouble maybe sourcing that in other places in their localities? Andy, I think you muted your mic.
Sorry about that. Yeah, in gold we have, and I just got some more $20 and $10 gold pieces in circulated extra fine condition. And the right there, you only show the $20 liberties. We have the $10 liberties for exactly half that amount also, which are probably even a better buy because 100 years ago, $20 was a tremendous amount of money. $10 would have been used much more frequently in commerce as a result. But these are coins that are 120 years old and nearly, and were money prior to 1933 confiscation. They're a true piece of Americana. They're really amazing gold coins. We really can't send those up to Canada because of a 13% VAT because they're not pure gold. But for anyone in the United States, they are as good of a buy as you'll find in gold at this time period. And again, we do have some of the $10 coins at half the price, but you're talking $80 or so under a gold eagle, which I've never seen in my career, and pretty much within a few dollars of all the 1 ounce bullion coins. It's a really good buy. Those coins are trading at a 40% premium to $1,000 gold price in 2007, 8, and 9. It's as good of a buy physically as you'll find in gold. And then we are offering the 2021 Noah's Ark coin. That wooden box, the coins, it's from the government of Armenia, but it's made by the Geiger Mint in Germany. Maybe my favorite mint altogether. They make the highest quality product out there. It's incredible, the quality. And the boxes that they ship their products in are really neat as well. At $4.50 over, that's pretty much what companies are selling 1 ounce silver rounds for. Right. I see companies selling this coin for as much as $2 over what we are all around the internet. I will always try when I bring a special to you or to Chris or anyone to try to make it just that, a special, not something that you can find elsewhere for the same price or less. I do my homework, and I think you'll find both of these items not only are unique, but as well priced as anything you'll find in the industry for what you're getting.
Very good. Well, thank you so much.
I disagree.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I heard a rumor about something about a 4th of July red hot drain the COMEX silver special, where it's going to be wildly, especially with people who are tired of these high spreads and premiums, that for those who, and JC, I know you have the hitters in your audience that want a 1,000 ounce bar. Is that true? Did I heard something about that, Skipper? And like a 4th of July silver party, celebrity guest, Jean-Claude, and 1,000 ounce silver bars?
And I will make sure that those 1,000 ounce silver bars are by far the lowest price in North America, without question. By the way, we have a new program in Canada, JC, for 1,000 ounce bars to go along with that, where we will have the lowest price in all of Canada, delivered directly to people's homes or in any of our Brinks facilities in Canada. We're bringing that down to the U.S., and that's what Chris is talking about also. We will be taking a bite out of the COMEX to whichever way we can. We've sourced a bunch of 1,000 ounce bars, and we'll make sure that the prices to the public are as good as you'll find anywhere in this country. And I hope to see you there as well, JC. I know I'll be there. You have no excuse. There is nothing going on July 4th in Canada. Nope. Here in the U.S., fireworks are, when you're 50, they're a little overrated. So I'll be looking forward to the intriguing conversation and chatting with Chris and others and the like-minded conversation on July 4th, the Silver July 4th special. I'll look forward to that.
Awesome. And do we have a link for that for the audience? Where can we send people to either register or be part of that? Either you, Andy, or Chris here.
I'll be hosting a party on the Arcadia channel where we'll have all that stuff in place. And I'll get you that as soon as we have it up. But, go out to your barbecuing during the day. And if you want to talk with your silver friends at night. Jean-Claude, if I may add one thing before we wrap up. This is the kind of thing we'll dig into Sunday. There's always two sides of every silver coin, unless you get a 5 ounce silver cube and then make dice out of them. But we'll leave that aside for today because sure, there's a lot of stuff that could use fixing in the silver market. I don't think anyone's going to question that. I mean, think about it. Someone sees COMEX price, $26. They call the dealer, it's $5 higher. Then they see a hyperinflation campaign, it goes down. I mean, it's not the greatest customer environment for newbies, certainly. And I think the positive to that, and one of the things I've been focusing on, and I would really suggest to keep in mind for anyone who's feeling frustrated, or especially if people are concerned financially or COVID, this and that, or maybe they've lost a job. I don't know if you really lose something like a job, but I think that's what the world is not forcing us. I mean, some go willingly. I've tried to do that. Others will go at their own time, but there's opportunity everywhere. In fact, anytime I'm reading this book about Bernie Madoff now, and aside from his Ponzi scheme, when they're talking about how back in the 60s, he went and got all the illiquid stocks, got the discount brokers. Like when an industry has been destroyed, there's plenty of stuff to fix. I mean, Andy, some of the stuff that we've been talking about is silver exchange, even going as far as to have fixed income products. So imagine instead of buying treasuries for your retirement, where you get a devalued coupon that they'll probably stop sending out soon enough anyway. I mean, it's like people look at these things like, oh, I could have an IRA with silver and I get X ounces of silver every month until for the rest of my life. I mean, it's the same math. You're just replacing the asset. So I would say that for anyone who's ready to leave that corporate nonsense, whether it's silver or anywhere, there's so much stuff that could use fixing right now. And I see it's like because of the way we've been herded, people are like paralyzed. But if you need help, you can email me at thebigsilvershort@arcadieconomics.com. We've been connecting with a lot of people who are getting involved. There's plenty of things that can be done and fixed. And rather than sitting there being frustrated, oh, the manipulation will never end, things are so much different now than ever before. And if you don't want to feel powerless and anybody wants to get involved, Jean-Claude, you're doing a wonderful effort. Andy's doing the same. And again, I'm happy to help. And I have more things that I'd love to implement that I can do by myself. So
I know how you feel.
Just find the positives in the things that are happening. It's better than just sitting around saying, oh, well, we're going to get beat over the head with a shovel for the next 30 years and there's nothing we can do about it. I don't believe that's true. And that would be my parting words of wisdom.
It's a community effort, and I thank you so much, Andy and Chris, for being here. And Chris, before I forget, your book, The Big Silver Short, is now available also on Audibles. Did I get that right? Can you explain that to the audience? Because I had a few members here in the last couple of months that were asking, hey, can we get the audio version of that? What's the update on that?
Yeah. The Audible version is now available. I think that's all linked to if you click on the book tab there, but paperback, audiobook, Kindle, Audible, you can go find it there. JC, if you want to give away an audio copy to a good, loyal fan who has been here helping you rebuild your channel over and over again, happy to do that today. And
I will say, not just because Chris is here, for anyone who hasn't read this book, there is a chapter with Bart Chilton that has changed my life in many ways, because I spoke about what Chris was the only person to ever get Bart Chilton, who those who don't know, former CFTC governor, the head of the CFTC, the commodity police, to admit things that anyone who owns precious metals must listen to. I am not just saying this just because Chris is on this podcast with us. It was the most instrumental, reinforcing, important interview I've ever heard in 30 years. And I implore everyone to buy this book for nothing else but to listen to that, if for nothing else, then to listen to that. And there's 10 other chapters or more that are just fantastic. So anyways, just my plug on something that I believe in wholeheartedly.
Well, there's
we got a few fans in the audience here saying that they already have their signed copy. So congratulations to you guys. I know we gave away a few books maybe last December on the previous channel. So folks, if you guys want to maybe one book here today, we'll auction that off. And so if you're in our PayPal tip jar here today supporting our show, we'll have the beautiful Sarah pick a winner here, and we'll announce that next week on our next podcast. Chris, back to you.
Yeah, just one, if I may make a public service announcement in terms of things you could listen to or potential opportunity. I'm finally figuring out how to get a little balance back in my life, which means I'm reintroducing that musical portion. And I am auditioning or / hiring for bass, drums, and keyboards in the Puerto Vallarta area. You could be in the band at Silverfest, depending on how it all shakes out. And if the words Grateful Dead, Fish, and String Cheese Incident make any sense to you, or if you know some music folks down here in Mexico, please send me a message at thebigsilvershort@arcadieconomics.com. And look forward to be playing some music for everybody soon.
Awesome. I'm a hell of a bongo player.
Awesome. Harry is saying, I'm waiting for Jean-Claude 007. Okay, I know what he's talking about. So let me run that.
Get the Jean-Claude 007 coin minted now that we're getting minted products set up too.
Yeah.
The best looking coin on the internet.
Yeah, by
I wouldn't mind
October,
a
we'll
Beyond
have the
Mystic
ability to
coin,
make
actually.
those.
I wouldn't mind a silver Beyond Mystic coin, have that stamped out. I think that would be really cool with the logo.
By October, I will be able to do that for you, JC. I could put your logo, I could put your face, whatever you want. It'll be done.
That's awesome. Now, are you going to be offering that one-on-one to the general public at large, or to producers who want to buy in bulk quantity?
It'll be to anyone, really. I mean, anyone who wants. We will make rounds and bars that we think will have demand. But if anyone wanted to pay for a mold, which is probably $2,000, and then pay for the silver, you could run your own run of personalized silver coins for businesses as your own calling card, whatever. Yeah, we can do that for sure.
That's cool. I see a few people in the chat saying, "Yeah, I'd love a Beyond Mystic coin." Yeah, I'll take you up on that when you're ready, Andy.
Right on. We will do it.
Oh yeah,
Andy, would you say, based on our conversations earlier this week, that once we start melting down those COMEX bars and having all the infrastructure in place, we might even be able to make limited edition JC Beyond Mystic coins and bars and still be beating the spread by more than $1? I mean, that
easily.
Understanding correctly.
You are, and we've already started accumulating literally boxes and boxes and boxes full of silver shot. We are preparing for this. We bought the same machines that the Pamp Swiss Mint uses, and so we will be able to make first-class, first-rate, beautiful products. 1 ounce rounds, 1 ounce, 10 ounce, and kilo silver bars by October.
That'll be awesome. That'll be awesome. And Kelly is saying here, yeah, I would love a Beyond Mystic coin. I'm like, yeah, if we do a coin, we'll do the logo on one side. And then on the flip side, I'll say, yeah, just your friendly neighborhood severe multiple violator. That's who I am, folks. So guys, if you're just finding me now, again, here on YouTube, please remember to like, share, and subscribe as we are rebuilding this community here for the third time at Beyond Mystic 003 here on YouTube. Please do go and subscribe also to Chris here at Arcadia Economics on YouTube, and on his website you can find out the details about his book, the audio version of that, and the upcoming events also, as he was talking about today. And finally, you can see Andy's work here at milesfranklin.com. There's still quite a few very pertinent blog articles on this site that are absolutely prescient even today. So if you want to get more information on the world going on around you as it pertains to the financial reset, this is definitely a good place to start. So folks, that was the Civil Shortage Precious Metals review here today with Chris Marcus and Andy SCHECTMAN. I am Jean-Claude, and I'm going to the water park with the kids today. So happy Canada Day, everyone. Merci beaucoup, Chris. Merci beaucoup, Andy, for being here, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.
Love you both. You guys be well.